Hi, everybody, and welcome to Cross Conversations with me, Andrea de la Peña. I wanted to resume on Jacob's story, so we're going to continue with part 2. This one I think is going to be a bit lengthier. We left where Jacob's mom had told him to flee, and his dad Isaac gave him his blessing because Esaú, his twin brother, was infuriated with him for stealing his birthright and his blessing, although he tricked him for the birthright, but he stole the blessing as well. So on his journey to Padan Aram, Jacob stopped for the night as darkness fell. He found a rock and he used it as a pillow, and he lay down to sleep. That night, he had a remarkable dream. He saw a stairway reaching up to heaven with the angels of God ascending and descending on it. Above the stairway stood the Lord, who said, "I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land of which you are lying. Your descendants will be as numerous as the dust of the earth, and they will spread out to the west, east, north, and south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you, and I will watch over you wherever you go. I will bring you back to this land, and I will not leave you until I have fulfilled my promise to you." When Jacob woke up, he was filled with awe, and he said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was unaware of it." He declared, "This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven." Jacob then took the stone he had used as a pillow, set it upright as a pillar, and poured oil on top of it to consecrate it. What a dream. He named the place Bethel, meaning house of God. In response to God's promise, Jacob vowed that he would give back a tenth of everything God blessed him with as an act of devotion and gratitude. I'm curious, and I will search into it, our tithing. Jacob continued his journey, and as he approached his destination, he came upon a well covered with a large stone. He noticed a group of shepherds with their flocks gathered around the well, and he approached them asking if they knew his uncle Laban. They confirmed that they did, and at that moment pointed out Laban's daughter Rachel approaching with her flock. She was also a shepherd. When Rachel arrived, Jacob introduced himself, kissed her as a sign of greeting, and helped her water the sheep. Overjoyed, Rachel ran home to share the news with her father, Laban. And of course, Laban hurried back to meet Jacob. He embraced him and said, "You are my own flesh and blood." Laban offered Jacob employment and asked what his wages should be. Laban had 2 daughters, Leah the elder and Rachel the younger. While Leah had delicate eyes, Rachel was strikingly beautiful, and Jacob was deeply in love with her. He proposed working 7 years in exchange for Rachel's hand in marriage, and Laban agreed. Talk about love at first sight. Crazy. I feel like that's like teenage puppy love. You know, you see somebody, you're like, I'm in love. Anyway, after 7 years, Jacob asked to marry Rachel, but on the wedding night, Laban deceived him. He sent Leah into Jacob's tent, and Jacob unknowingly consummated the marriage. In the morning, Jacob realized he'd been tricked. Ironically, he now found himself the victim of deception, much like the one he had practiced years earlier. Laban explained that it was their custom for the eldest daughter to marry first. However, Jacob's love for Rachel was unwavering, so he agreed to work an additional 7 years if Laban allowed him to marry Rachel as well. Laban consented, and after Jacob completed Leah's marriage week, Rachel also became his wife. As wedding gifts, Laban gave Leah a maidservant named Zilpah, and Rachel a maidservant named Bilhah. Leah, however, found herself in a heartbreaking position, as Jacob's love was clearly for Rachel. But the Lord saw that Leah was unloved and had compassion on her. He blessed her by enabling her to conceive. From this point on, it was a competition between the sisters to give Jacob children. Leah had 4 boys, so Rachel was jealous. So she had her maidservant sleep with Jacob so she could have children through her. When Bilhah had 1 or 2, Leah did the same and gave Jacob her maidservant, Zilpah, whom also bore a couple of sons. It seems like procreation came to a halt for a bit. This one time, Reuben, Leah's firstborn, went out for mandrakes. Rachel asked Leah to give her some of those mandrakes, but Leah became upset and said, "You take my husband, and now you want to take my son's mandrakes?" So they struck a deal. Rachel said, "If you give me the mandrakes, I'll let you have Jacob for a night." So they struck the deal, and Jacob went into Leah's tent, and she conceived her 5th biological son. She conceived again with a 6th. Leah was always hopeful that her husband would love her. Finally, after many years, God heard Rachel's prayers and blessed her with her 1st biological son. She named him Joseph and asked the Lord to bless her still with another child. So at this point, let's recount how many kids Jacob has. With Leah, his first wife, he has Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Dinah, a daughter. With Leah's maidservant, Zilpah, he has Gad and Asher. With Rachel's maidservant, Bilhah, he has Dan and Naphtali. And then Rachel finally had Joseph. So that's 12 children, 11 boys and 1 girl. While the idea of having children with multiple partners may seem foreign or even odd to us, I get it. But it is a reality that a lot of us can relate to in today's culture. We live in a world filled with broken homes. God's original design was for a man and a woman to become one and to raise their children together as a unified family. That's not the truth in today's society, unfortunately. So we can relate to all of that is going on, kind of, sort of, with Jacob and his wives. But we humans are flawed. We make poor choices, and it leads to complex family dynamics, which is what I'm saying that is similar to back in that time. So in many ways, I think Jacob's story resonates with modern experiences because it reminds us that even in the midst of human imperfection, God's grace and purpose will still prevail. After many years, Jacob's family had grown, and he decided it was time to leave his father-in-law's house and return back to the land of his father, or at least where God had told him. Jacob and Laban agreed on wages for all the time that Jacob had worked for him. Laban, however, recognized that God's favor was with Jacob, as his household had been abundantly blessed ever since Jacob arrived. Not wanting to lose those blessings or the wealth Jacob had earned, Laban repeatedly changed the terms of their agreement to benefit himself. At one point, Jacob confided in his wives. He told them that their father had deceived him and changed his wages 10 times. Realizing it was time to move on, Jacob took his family and possessions and left, trusting in one of the agreements they had originally made. Galatians chapter 6, verse 7, it says, "Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows." I'm not saying that it was kind of an eye for an eye, but as the story unfolds, I can't help but think, but I like to believe that God refined Jacob's character through these experiences. When all was said and done, Jacob learned humility, perseverance, and to trust in God rather than relying on his own schemes. That's a miracle in itself, I think. In the end, God does bless Jacob abundantly, despite his own schemes and those done to him. This brings me hope. We need to believe that God can work through human flaws and failures to bring about his purposes. Eventually, I think it was like on day 3, Laban did discover that Jacob had fled with his family, so he set out to pursue him. During the night, God appeared to Laban in a dream and warned him not to say anything to Jacob, whether good or bad. I would have just turned around and went back home, but Laban did not. He caught up with Jacob, and he acknowledged that he understood Jacob's desire to return to his father's house, but he accused him of stealing his household gods. Unaware that Rachel had taken them, Jacob denied the accusation and even declared that whoever was found with the stolen items would not live. Meanwhile, Rachel, she hid the idols in her saddlebag, so when her dad searched her belongings, she avoided suspicion because she said she couldn't get up because she was on her menstrual cycle. Another deceitful person here. Maybe that's why Jacob loved her so much. Kidding. Despite the differences, Jacob and Laban settled their differences in front of God, making a covenant of peace. And Rachel, her secret did remain undiscovered by both of these men. That concludes with part 2 of Jacob's life. We'll go on into part 3 tomorrow. But I just want to thank everyone who's joining in. If you're appreciating this, I'm thankful. I know I appreciate, like I said, and I always say, like, I love the Bible. I love reading the Bible. I love learning from the Bible. It tells us God's character. It shows us human nature. So it gives me hope, that even though I'm a sinner, even though I run through the muck, I guess, God can still use me. God still has love for me. And most importantly, God died for me. And he did the same for you. All we got to do is accept it. Bye for now, guys. Stay safe.